This video is my attempt to create and paint a scenario that may occur on draft night 2023, about a month from now. Something that I think is increasingly likely with each passing day, or at least a couple of the elements that I'm going to present here. As a Ravens fan, early this week, it seems like we've already experienced a week or a week and a half just in the last 2 days with all the information and attention and focus on the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and Coach Harbaugh and all the things that happened in the last 24, I guess maybe 36 hours at this point. I'm not sure a lot of us are emotionally going to be able to make it to the draft if the amount of information and focus stays at this level or even heightens. So what we're going to do in this scenario is I'm going to fast forward a month. I'm going to push forward and create a scenario that lets you, the listener, or the audience, choose the Ravens' course of action at a particular moment in time. So here's the scenario. It's draft night, late April 2023, and the Ravens' only free agent signings at this point is Nelson Aguilar and Rock Ya-Sin, who at this point in late March, he's not actually been signed, but I think he will. Second piece of this is that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have still been unable to come to a contract extension agreement. And no other team in the NFL has offered Lamar or tendered a contract either, at least not officially, not yet. Pick number 22 is approaching for the Ravens. The Chargers have just made their pick at pick 21, and the following players are available and still on the board. And look, I don't think that all of these guys will necessarily be there, but we're going to let this flow through. And you're going to see multiple pictures of at least two of the positions that the Ravens have needs at. So Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jalen Hyde on the previous picture. Cam Smith, Deonte Banks, Keely Ringo, and then Nolan Smith and Will McDonald. A lot of high-end talent is available here at 22 for you to take right now, if you so choose, with the 5 minutes that you have allotted. And you certainly have needs for the Ravens. I think it's quite obvious at left outside corner and wide receiver. Now, how they address wide receiver, I think, is position-based. Certain guys project more as an X receiver, and I personally think that they have an X receiver, a guy who can play X receiver effectively in Rashad Bateman. But I think Bateman could be a X or a Z, or some teams just go left and right. So one receiver is to the left and one receiver is to the right. Think of the old Colts teams with Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning. They had a left and right receiver generally. Some teams switch sides with the X and the Z to the play side, to the call side, I should say, and to the back side. In this case, for the Ravens, we're just talking about the players that are here. And again, I don't know that necessarily Jordan Addison's going to actually be there at pick 22, or even Zay Flowers for that matter. But this is a simulation to try to show you the type of talent you could pick right now as the GM and then move the franchise forward by addressing at least one of the positions that you think is most important, either wide receiver, cornerback, probably outside left corner, which all of these guys generally play. Deonte Banks traveled a little bit right and left. Or if you so choose to go edge defender, Nolan Smith, Will McDonald are both still available. However, to add a little bit of simulation or pressure to the situation, the Arizona Cardinals, yes, those Arizona Cardinals, they've offered a trade. One that both solves a problem for the Ravens and maybe creates another, depending on how some other things work out. They've offered to trade up. They want pick 22, presumably to draft Deonte Banks, who's still available. And in exchange, they're offering to give the Ravens, picks 34 and 66 in this year's draft. It's a draft that's deep in corners and receivers, in my opinion. Maybe it's not deep in receivers that are, quote, number one receivers or, the best receiver on your team, however you choose to describe them. But I think there's a ton of quality wide receivers in this draft who can make an impact on a team early in their career and for a long time, 6, 8, 10-year careers. You, as the Ravens GM, could potentially get, if you accept this trade, a quality wide receiver and DB at 34 and 66. And I mean, there will be really good players still on the board 12 picks from now at pick 34. It's not like all of these guys will be gone. Some of them will. Having said that, some of them will. By trading back, you risk missing out on someone that you might have as the top two or 3 player at a position of need on your board, depending on what your board looks like. The following guys, I would say, would probably not be there if you trade back from 22 to 34. And they may not, some of them may not be there at 22 in the first place, right? Let's be honest. But they certainly, I would not expect them to be there at 34. The guys with the big, bright orange X are ones that in this simulation are not going to be there at 34. So you have a little bit of a benefit here in the situation I'm presenting and carving for you. Would you rather have one of the 8 or 9 players that are shown on this scrolling marquee of pictures? If so, then you should say, I want to pick at 22. And if you are content to trade back and maybe get 2 of them, or maybe get one of these guys and one other quality player, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to accept the trade with the Arizona Cardinals, and you're going to want pick 34 and 66 because the Ravens don't have that second-round pick. This is going to basically give them a late first-round pick, if you will, at 34, except they don't get the fifth-year option, obviously. Now, we're going to throw a little bit of a wrench into it because there's so much talk about receiver, and even Coach Harbaugh on Monday, one of the main questions it seemed like he was asked, or the points he was asked about, besides Lamar and the contract situation, was receiver. And I thought a couple of his answers were pretty direct. They looked at 40. He's looked at 40 receivers, and I'm sure the staff has looked at more. So let's throw a little wrench into it. Let's add a layer. We're going to add one more layer after that. So would you pick at 22? Would you take the trade back offer that we just described? Or would you counter offer Arizona? There's a long history of the Ravens and Arizona making trades. Of course, the most recent one is Marquise Brown for pick, I think, 23 last year, which we then turned into pick 24 and chose Tyler Linderbaum. Let's add another layer. Would you counter offer them? Would you give them pick 22, which is what they asked for originally? And then would you add a player in there that maybe salary-wise will match? Would you offer pick 22 and Rashad Bateman for their pick 34, pick 96, and DeAndre Hopkins? I don't know that salary-wise this works perfect. I'm not going to pretend that I think it does. I just think it's an interesting option for Arizona. And look, I'm going to go on record. Like, I'm a huge Rashad Bateman fan. I do not want the Ravens to trade him. I'm creating content that hopefully creates some interest from you and comes at some of these situations from a different angle. They may not accept the counter, Arizona. Hell, if they're really trying to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins, they might have offered something like this in the first place, right? You notice I replaced pick 66 with pick 96. I don't think there's any way in the world that the Cardinals are giving us 34, 66, and DeAndre Hopkins. Regardless of what we think of Hopkins, Bateman, there is some evidence that this fits the salary structure for Arizona. I don't know that DeAndre Hopkins coming to Baltimore fits us necessarily at all unless you get a significant restructure of his contract. But I wanted to add a layer there, or add an element, and then I'm going to simulate just a little bit more pressure here. Here's the kicker to the whole thing, and then we're going to stop the video, and I'm going to let you guys hopefully vote in the comment section. You may be voting already as it premieres. Here's the kicker. We've taken a while to get to the point here. I wanted to do this in 10 minutes. It's going to be close. Plot twist is neither the Colts, Raiders, or the Patriots have taken a quarterback early in round 1. And no one expects the Patriots to, right? I know, all of those teams are supposedly out, right? The same media that knew nothing or said nothing about Lamar's, if we believe what Lamar posted, which I think we should, that he requested a trade on March 2nd. The phrasing of it was interesting, but that's a topic for another day. The same media that told us nothing about that leaked nothing about it, never mentioned it at all, now wants to tell us that all of these teams are already out. It's interesting to me that it's late March. The draft is in late April. And then you still have a significant amount of time between then and I think it's July 17th or whatever when a team can offer. Maybe I have my date wrong there. Maybe it's the July 7th. Got it. Understood. The media knows everything, and they're always going to be up front with us and tell us as much information as possible to keep us informed. Sure. I guess, look, the Patriots and the Raiders don't think they need a quarterback, or they're not behaving as if they do. You got Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo. They appear to be, locked in as their starters. Makes sense. Mac Jones was a starter last year for the Patriots. That makes sense, at least. And then the Raiders gave a lot of money to Jimmy G. In this simulation, look, the Panthers took Bryce Young. Texans took C.J. Stroud. Lions drafted Anthony Richardson. Sounds kind of weird, but it's a somewhat surprising move, I guess. But here's the thing, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the Lions do not plan on drafting in the top 10 in 2024. They do not. In my opinion, they're loading up to win 10, 12 football games next season. And in this simulation, which I did do a little bit of mock draft simulations with, but it wasn't hard coded. I didn't force them to take Anthony Richardson. It was a couple of times when they did. Will Levis didn't get selected until pick 19 to Tampa Bay, so a little bit later than some people would project. So as you or we decide what to do, stick and pick at 22, take the Cardinals' original offer of 34 and 66 for pick 22 and 157, or counter them to try to get a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver in here, show Lamar that you're serious about rebuilding the offense, which I think it's obvious that they are. But this would be a stamp on that, letting him know, hey, we're really serious. We went out and got DeAndre Hopkins. Unfortunately, it would mean getting rid of what I consider to be a premier talent in Rashad Bateman. Feel free to suggest, hey, I'd replace him with someone else. I'm just not sure that Arizona would take some of our other guys that we offer in lieu of the fact that they're getting rid of pick 34 and Hopkins. Maybe if you subtracted pick 96 out of there, maybe there'd be an opportunity to make this even out a little bit more. There is clearly the added risk of the Patriots or the Colts, for that matter, or even the Raiders offering Lamar a contract after the draft. That would leave the Ravens with a tough decision to make. We all know that. Do they match it? And I guess that'd be a sizable contract at that point. I know there's people who think it's a dead issue already. As I record this on March 28th, I refuse to believe a couple of things. I refuse to believe that so many teams are, quote, out on it and aren't going to consider it and haven't been considering it. I think that's BS. And I don't know why that's being thrown out there by media people. They're being fed that information. Hey, you don't think it's possible that someone from a professional football team wants to put out false information leading up to the draft to maybe let the Ravens, go ahead and go out and sign another free agent for $7 million and then not have as much cap space to match? I mean, I don't know that $7 million would change the dynamic, but you hopefully understand the point that I'm trying to make. I expect some team to explore the option. In fact, I think they already have. I think that's how we got some of the information we got maybe a week and a half ago that seems like it was 3 months ago at this point in terms of the Ravens Lamar news cycle. Or do the Ravens let him walk if he gets that offer sheet? So you got to consider those things as you're making your decision here, because you have the added risk, the added element of the Colts, not drafting a quarterback at 4 when Anthony Richardson and Will Levis were both there. That's why I set up this scenario the way I did. Given that backdrop, what would you do? Would you stick and pick at 22? Would you trade back, accept Arizona's offer to give them 22 and 157, in exchange for 34 and 96? Or would you counter offer? You guys let me know in the comment section. This was designed for me to create a scenario for you. I do have a little bit to say about the supposed lack of interest in Lamar Jackson. I think it's a commentary for another day. As you can tell from what I said a couple of minutes ago, I do not believe everything that I've read in the media to that regard. I think there's already been contact between Lamar and at least 2 other teams. I feel like there's enough evidence of that. I think that's why you see a ramping up of social media activity on the part of Lamar and certain news members in the last week and a half. I think there's people who know about it. Obviously, Lamar does. I think there's people who know about it. And I think that another thing to be said about the media telling us that everyone is out on Lamar Jackson is that, what are the things that they've been right about so far as it relates to this situation? Well, there's certain things, certain numbers, dating back to the Adam Schefter report that supposedly came from November. But then there's even certain aspects of that report that are just false. So keeping all that in mind, what would you do at pick 22? You had 5 minutes. This video went on for 13. What would you do in this scenario if you were the GM, and why would you choose the path that you chose? Appreciate you guys checking out the video. If you wouldn't mind leaving a comment and let me know what you think of this video structure. This is the second year in a row that I've done one of these. I think I may do a third one as we get closer to the draft. Appreciate any feedback or comments, on the video topic and the way I presented the scenario to you guys tonight. Appreciate you guys' time.